Hey, welcome back. I am finally getting back into my videos on the SRX and the jncia security certification that will get you more familiar with Juniper security devices. If we go to Juniper's website, we can really get a quick look at some of the Juniper security devices. And let's click on products and solutions, security, next generation firewalls. And you can start to look at all the different SRXs that they have to offer. If you click here, SRX firewalls, wow, they're coming in green now. I haven't even seen those before. Go down through here and it shows all the different platforms. It shows their performance characteristics. This will come in handy when you're trying to right size what you expect or what you need to process in your network and in buying the right platform for that. When you look at how an SRX processes packets, you start talking about things like flow-based versus packet-based when you compare them to other Juniper products. Okay, flow-based versus packet-based. If you look down here, you'll see this is what flow-based processing looks like. A packet comes into an SRX and it looks to match it on an existing session. If there is an existing session, yes, then it goes through these functions and then the packet exits the SRX. If it does not match a session, then it goes through this chain of events in creating a session, and then it allows the packet to leave. Over here in my lab, I have a few devices that are not responding at the moment. Okay, a factory defaulted SRX, virtualized SRX, that is, and I've already set the password. When you type show security flow status, you will see, you will see how this thing is defaulted. It is defaulted into flow-based forwarding, all right? If you want to change this to be packet-based, you're really turning it into a router. You're disabling its firewalling function for the most part. You're disabling all that flow-based processing I just talked about, and you're just making it a router. I'll link a video that I previously did on how to configure a SRX to be a router. If you just want to test it, if you need a few Juniper routers for testing, that's how you can do it. You can use an SRX and make it a router. One of the differences between layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, and above devices is the level of configuration that is needed and the complexity thereof for each one of these devices. A repeater, otherwise known as a hub, or a switch, otherwise known as a bridge, a router, and then a firewall are the devices I'm mentioning here. Okay? A repeater hub, you don't even see many of these anymore, but it will forward information, and really, if a packet comes into it, it sends it out of every interface that has a connection on it. It repeats it, okay? Very inefficient. It forms one collision domain. A switch will also forward information by default right out of the box from the factory. If you have a Ethernet frame coming into it, it will do a what's known as BUM forwarding, broadcast, unknown unicast, and multicast forwarding until it builds a bridge table, and then it'll start efficiently forwarding that information. This will happen on the default VLAN. Let's call it VLAN 1. If VLAN 1 is configured in this thing from the factory, then you can use it right out of the box, open it up, plug it into your network, and it'll start forwarding information in that default VLAN. Of course, a lot more complexities with switches and bridges are possible, and you're going to have to configure those things. But I'm just talking about using a device right from the factory is possible with a switch. Moving on, it gets quickly more complicated and impossible to use these devices as we go further up the protocol stack, taking them right out of the box from the factory. You cannot do that with a router. You can't use a router right from the factory out of the box. For starters, the interfaces are shut down, okay? Those interfaces are shut down. I'll put a little red X to show that if there's a cable plugged into there, those interfaces are administratively shut down. You need to admin them up. But even adminning them up, I'll give you a green X for that. Excuse me, a green arrow. Adminning them up still won't allow traffic to go through there. You have to create IP subnets. Well, what IP subnet do you put on there? You put on IP subnets that are specific to your network. Well, that means you're going to have to understand your network and the placement of that router in your network and what are your plans for it? How do you intend on using it? Wherever you put it in the network, are you going to be enabling routing protocols, things like that? So it quickly gets more complicated. And the level of configuration requires more insight into how you're using it and what are the existing subnets in your network that are available, and things like that. All right. So right away, the router is already becoming more complicated to configure, and you have to understand how you're using it in your network. And I'll also say this, once you get this router configured in your network and get those IP subnets on there or enable those IP routing protocols to get that forwarding information learned and discovered, it will then start forwarding information to all known subnets. This brings us to the firewall, layer 4 and above. A firewall is opposite of all these other ones. It will not forward anything unless explicitly told to do so. Okay, so not only do you need to know the all these other things, you need to know VLAN information, you need to know IP subnet information. You need to then configure things like zones, and we'll get into that, on which interfaces are in which zones, zone 1, zone 2, and how do you want this information to flow through there? Do you want to allow all protocols or all applications? And it just gets increasingly more complicated as you get into firewalls. And we're going to see a lot of those different things and how to configure them as we move forward. Getting you a little more familiar with the CLI in SRX, the greater than sign represents you're in operational mode. If you hit a question mark, then it will show you the possible completions. So you can, if you type clear, CL tab will autocomplete. CL spacebar will autocomplete. Okay, and that's if it's unambiguous, meaning that there's no other CL commands. So look at that. There's two C commands, clear and configure. So if you put the letter C there and hit the tab key, it tells you this is ambiguous, that you need to be more specific. If you put the L there and hit tab, it will autocomplete, or the letter O, and again, you can hit tab or spacebar, it will autocomplete. Now, configure is entering configure mode. Configuration mode is shown with a pound sign. See the pound sign there at the bottom? You are in configuration mode. If you hit a question mark, it will show you all the options with configuration mode. All right, typing exit gets you out of configuration mode. You are now back into what? Yep, operational mode, and it's shown by a greater than sign. So again, hit the question mark, it shows you what your options are. Now, it is hierarchical. In operational mode, the commands are hierarchical. Type the word show question mark. Now look at that, 23% at the bottom. You see that? That means you're only a quarter of the way through. If you hit the enter key, you can go line by line, 27, 29%, 30%, 31%, 32%. There's a lot more. If you hit the space bar, it will finish off an entire page of output each time you do that, whatever the definition of a page is. And I think it's a certain amount of lines. But anyway, so they are hierarchical. Show question mark. Okay, like let's do show OSPF question mark. It gets more specific in the hierarchy of commands. All right. Kind of like this. This shows you the hierarchy that I was just speaking of. So if you type the word show with a question mark, this is the level of all the different commands. If you use the word OSPF and a question mark, then there's multiple levels after that. If you look at database, let's jump over there and look at that. Show OSPF. Database, question mark, area, question mark, 0.0.0.0, hit enter, and it tells you OSPF's not running, but that's okay. What we're doing is we're just looking at how to navigate the hierarchy of operational mode commands. Another example could be show interfaces, question mark, and here's all your interfaces you have to pick from. Gigabit Ethernet 000, question mark, brief. There's a brief output. By the way, you might have seen me quickly get rid of the word brief. Control W will go back and erase one word. Control W again, and I'm hitting the control key and the letter W at the same time. Holding down the control key with my pinky or whatever finger, just hold down the control key and then hit W over and over again, and it just bounces back over those words. Show interfaces. Now, if you hit Control B, it just goes back one letter and it does not erase it. Control F takes you forward one letter. Control A takes you to the beginning of the line. Control E takes you to the end of the line. These are known as emacs key sequences. I just did a Google search, and here you have a listing of all the different CLI keyboard shortcuts that I was just talking about. They come in handy, speed things up. So if we get back to the screen, go into configure mode, you know you're there because there's a pound sign on the prompt, and question mark tells you the different things you can do. And you begin to navigate through the hierarchy by typing commands. Okay, so right away it tells you with the prompt, the word edit is there. If you want to edit an interface, you do just that. Now the prompt changes and shows you now you are in the hierarchy of interfaces. Okay, type top to go back to the top. So that's just some quick navigation help of how to get around in the CLI. So if you see the edit prompt, that means you're at the top of the configuration hierarchy. Again, question mark shows you all the different things you can dive into. You can type edit interfaces like I just showed you before. Now you know you're in the interfaces hierarchy. Now do a question mark, and you have even a smaller listing of configuration options. I'm kind of confused because I think, there it is. Okay, interface name. So type edit, and then in brackets it says interface name. So if we do J000, hit enter, now we are in Gigabit Ethernet 000, question mark. Continue using the word edit and question mark, and it'll tell you yet a more specific list of instructions that are pertinent to whatever stanza, whatever configuration stanza you are inside of. So right now we're in the interfaces Gigabit Ethernet 000 stanza. And so any options you have are going to be specific to that stanza. Okay? If you want to go up one level, type up 1, see it backs you out to interfaces. Let's go back to edit G000 again. Excuse me, 000. Okay, up 2 will take you up 2 levels. And if we do that again, excuse me, edit interfaces, edit G000. Again, top takes you back to the root level, okay? Show pipe compare shows you if there's any uncommitted changes in the configuration. All right, so instead of going edit into interfaces, edit into G00, pretty sure you can do it all in one fell swoop. Excuse me, 0. Yes, you can just jump right into it like that. Or another way of doing it is, without diving into the different stanzas, you can use the word set, interfaces, G000, question mark, and then you can put some of those options in there like that. So let's put ether options, and let's just set something like no auto MDIX. Hit enter. Set means you're actually setting something, you're configuring something, okay? And you can be fully qualified in all the different stanzas that you would normally need to go into if you were using the edit function. If you use the word set, you can use a fully qualified line of configuration to specify exactly what you're configuring or setting, okay? Show pipe compare will show us the changes that are pending. The plus signs mean this is going to be committed. This is what's being changed. If there were minus signs there, it would remove that setting. Okay. You can commit check to check the sanity of your configuration. If it says it succeeds, then you can be sure that you're going to succeed if you commit the configuration. If you don't want to commit it, you can issue a rollback. Now, show pipe compare will show no uncommitted changes. All right. So when I speak of committed and uncommitted configuration, I'm really speaking of the comparison of what's known as the active configuration and the candidate configuration. The active configuration is like a startup config or a running config in, say, for instance, Cisco. That's what the active configuration is. It is both the startup config and the running config. When you start to configure a Juniper product, it copies the active config into what is known as the candidate configuration. So right now, if you type in, so what I mean is inside this SRX, there's a active configuration that is controlling the router, okay? Everything it does is controlled by the active configuration. There is the diagram. It finally came up on the screen. And if you type config or go into config mode, it then copies that active config into what is known as the candidate configuration, okay? Any changes made to that candidate configuration are only saved back to the active config when you type the word commit. All right, so that's what's going on in what I was just explaining. If we get over here and look at the CLI, let's, for instance, look at show interface gigabit 000 terse, or let's look at some of the behaviors of it. You know, bytes in, bytes out. Of course, it's not doing anything right now, but this will show actually what's going on the device in operational mode, and it's going to be based on the configuration that's active. Okay, that's the active config I talk about. When we type the word config or configure, it creates that copy in what's known as the candidate configuration, and any change we make, let's set that change, show pipe compare, and commit and quit. Then we'll go back in, and I'll show you how to delete it. You just put the word delete in front of that command, show pipe compare, and now it's got minus signs. All right. And so you're modifying only the candidate configuration. It doesn't go into play until you hit commit or commit and quit. Commit and quit simply means commit the change and then quit back to operational mode. All right, so that's all I got to say about that. That is pretty much all I have for getting back into our coverage of SRX and JNCIA security certification. This was just an intro to various firewalls, talking about the differences in networking devices. And also, I just wanted to talk about the way that an SRX device handles traffic, that it goes through the flow module and all those different parts of processing when it goes through its security functions. And also just to get you a little bit of an intro to the CLI. If you're new to Juniper and Junos, you're going to want to navigate or learn how to navigate in operational mode and config mode. All right. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.